Live.
All right, welcome back to the Chabinet meeting. It's been 2 weeks. I take full responsibility for that one. That one is completely on me. It is 4:25 here as we're recording, and as always, there is a ton of stuff in the news. But I think the focus, at least for what we're going to go over today, obviously, is the Derek Chauvin trial, which will probably have some far-reaching implications way into the future here of the Joe Biden administration, and we are going to discuss some of those today. I am the department chair,
I am the cabinet.
and unfortunately, at least at the moment, it appears that we will not have the gavel, but we certainly desire to get her opinion on this one. And if worse comes to worse, this will be a part one of a part two that maybe we will do next week or the following week. We will see because there's definitely a lot that we want to talk about.
Yep.
So let me just ask you this, there, cabinet. What were your first implications? Once you heard the trial was over and we saw, obviously, that he was guilty on all counts, second
Okay.
degree murder, third degree murder, and whatnot. What were your initial
Yeah,
feelings?
I think my reaction may surprise you a little. I got home that day and opened my uh, browser window and observed that there were live feeds available. So I had the, I guess, benefit of watching the sentence, or not the sentence, watching the verdict delivered. Um,
I may or may not have been in the car watching it live while I was driving.
yeah, you know
Go
what?
ahead.
They'll need a warrant to find that out. So, uh, I don't. I remember looking beforehand at the jury and recognizing that it did seem to be a fairly diverse cross section of Americans. Diverse, in my opinion, not just in superficial things, but in experience, right? In different kinds of jobs and things like that. So, I thought that was good. Um, I was more shocked to learn how quickly the verdict had been returned than to learn what it was. Once I saw that the verdict was being delivered within 24 hours um, of deliberation commencing, it seemed evident to me that there was not much deliberation. So I figured from there he would be guilty on all three counts.
And that was the implication. I was actually watching a live stream by oh God, the Canadian lawyer along with
Viva,
two other.
Viva, and I think he was on with Nate the lawyer at the same time.
Yes, and there was
Yep.
another
Okay,
gentleman
so
as
that's the
well.
one I watched.
Yep, that's what I was watching as well.
Okay.
And that's the way it went,
Yeah.
and it went the
Look, and
way
I
it went.
respect the process, right? So, um, much as I may fear that the jurors were biased by irresponsible comments made by politicians, uh, much as I fear that societal and social pressures were placed on the jurors outside of the context of the actual case, um, that's for them to decide, right? They live with their decisions as citizens, and the judge makes his selections, and the lawyers have had their opportunities to rule out. The lawyers on both sides have had their opportunities to rule out any juror that they feel is way outside the mainstream. Um, so I certainly respect the decision. I wouldn't want to, just because I may have come to a different conclusion. And by the way, I don't know. I didn't see all the evidence. I didn't watch every inch of the trial. So I don't know what conclusion I might have drawn. I also am not
Hmm.
super familiar with Minnesota's state laws regarding Second Amendment. It seems it seems more convoluted than I would expect it to be, but probably all laws in all states are more convoluted than I would want them to be. I have a
Yeah,
very sort of, I don't know, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington view of the court system. It's one of the last things I thought I might still respect. So um, yeah, I think that I think that guilty on all three counts is probably wrong. I think he was definitely guilty of some of those counts, and I'm not exactly sure which ones. Again, because I didn't study the evidence that was presented to the jurors. I did
Right.
observe the videotape in the beginning, and I did hear things that came out afterwards. Oh, maybe it was fentanyl, this and that. Certainly there are a lot of extenuating circumstances. Certainly Mr. Floyd is no angel and should not be made into any kind of martyr. Um, but
Right. But
that doesn't necessarily mean that Chauvin acted perfectly appropriately.
right. You know,
And I think some small
particularly. You know,
mistakes are forgivable, and small mistakes that involve a death are perhaps less forgivable. Um, I
regardless.
understand that the sentencing will be between 30 and 45 years, because each count is a sentence between 10 and 15. That's the discretion that the judge has available.
Yeah.
Minnesota does not have capital punishment.
It's regardless of the previous acts of of the individual, what happened should not have happened. And yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of other factors there that we would have to get into, and it's so convoluted. We would have to sit there to make a more well-rounded decision.
Well, I
Um,
can make a distinction where if what happened stopped 3 minutes earlier, I might be saying right now, well, that was all within reasonable behavior for a police officer in that situation. When the body stopped moving and there was no longer a pulse, and the guy's sitting there for another 3 minutes and not letting anybody else come and take the pulse, you know, that's that's where I draw the line and say, okay, well, that was criminally negligent.
I can't understand. I don't know, not to equate the my experience into the situation, but as a wrestler, I mean, you know how to control somebody's body, you know how to control certain things. I cannot understand how you can't know to give that guy just a little bit of room, just a little bit of room to breathe. But clearly that
I'm
did
not
not
even
happen.
convinced that the knee was applying that much pressure, or that was the cause of the lack of breath. I'm convinced, perhaps, that um, that the man was simply ODing to death and was not receiving medical treatment or help because the police officer um, was still treating him like a threat, right? And
Well,
and
yeah,
there was a
they
point where he was clearly no longer a threat.
right. I mean, not to say they've exhausted every option, but like he refused to go in the car, he refused to sit in there, so they brought him to the ground. Which apparently, if if what the defense offered was true, which was a pamphlet in the Minneapolis Police Department's packet, it essentially said that that is something you do to minimize not just a threat, but also to bring a situation to being brought into control. Which whether that's right or not is up to the individual perspective. Um, but we should probably get started into
Yeah,
the
let's
article.
start talking about some of the framing around this thing.
Right, but I mean, most of the stuff you said is kind of the same way I feel. I definitely believe he should have got something for sure. I think second degree was a little excessive, but
Again, like Minnesota has unusual classifications of second degree, which I was surprised to learn throughout this process.
right, yeah, but it's. I just hope people did not act out of fear of the crowd outside and people, you know, certain politicians saying certain things that may have swayed opinions. That's my fear. But in the same instance, I don't know. There's a piece of me that says that maybe this is what is needed to maybe turn a corner.
Well,
I don't.
I think what's frustrating is there's so much media attention around this thing that you are never going to find a jury that had not heard of the event,
And
which is
that
what you're
inherently
supposed to
is
be
the
able to
problem.
find.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll get into this here. All right, so starting from the beginning here. So after Chauvin's guilty verdict, the trial for American policing, the struggle for public trust begins anew. So when Michael Brown, a black teenager, was fatally shot by police in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, a special White House panel quickly offered up a wave of reforms expected to help guide law enforcement through the most fraud encounters. Um, Building trust and legitimacy on both sides of the policing citizen divide is not only the first pillar of this task force report, but also the foundational principle underlying this inquiry into the nature of relations between law enforcement and the communities they serve, the study concluded. By the way, this is obviously something in the Obama administration. It's something that he really pushed, but it really went nowhere. At least that's my recollection of it. Just 6 years later, the findings in what was then regarded as a landmark analysis of modern policing have been observed in a new wave of deadly actions that have renewed calls for re-examining American law enforcement. Sorry.
Yeah, you're losing your audio just a hair. I'm not sure what's up.
All right, let me see what I can do real quick. I'll fix that.
Turned you up a little. Seems okay.
No, it's at the same thing.
Okay. Oh, it was that stupid thing again.
Yeah,
Last
I
two
fixed it, but
windows.
I don't know. Yeah, but we'll see if it actually does anything. I don't know.
Okay. Seems okay. So, just 6 years later, the findings in what was then regarded as a landmark analysis of modern policing have been obscured in a new wave of deadly actions that have. Okay. The findings in what was regarded as a landmark analysis. But by who? Who regarded that as a landmark? Okay, whatever.
Yeah, well, clearly
Analyze later.
the
There's a bias here.
yeah, of course there was. I mean,
Former millennial. There's an agenda, I should say. It's not just a bias. There's an agenda. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, found guilty Tuesday for the murder of George Floyd, now represents only one exhibit in a growing body of evidence in which police officers' use of lethal force faces unprecedented public scrutiny, condemnation, and demands for change. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, in a statement immediately after the verdict, said that the decisions represented a new era of police accountability to end the recurring and enduring deaths at the hands of law enforcement. Wait, you're saying that no other jury in American history would have reached the same conclusion? You're saying that no other prosecution in American history would have leveled the same charges? Okay.
yeah, they're making a real. I mean, they're going to make this into something that is huge, and mind you, it very much can be huge.
Well,
I
no,
think
it
there
has
have been
become huge. It's a
some
massive
overtures.
element in the zeitgeist. But okay, I don't understand how you think that this jury was different from any other jury, which appears to be what you're saying. Okay.
Well, they're going to push that because it got a decision that they wanted in a real big way, and that was the intended goal clearly. But as we had discussed earlier, the jury spoke. It made its decision, and at least I know you do. I
Yeah,
fully also
I think
respect
the
the decision the
intended
jury
goal is
made.
always constitutional. A quick and speedy trial by a jury of peers, and the result to be respected and honored by all of the citizens, whatever it be.
Right.
Which is what we got,
So
and I respect the decision, but I don't understand. Okay, this like framing where it's like if it's this decision, then it was a good decision. If it's that decision, then it was bad. And it's like, okay, well, were you on the jury, Mr. Columnist at USA Today?
right, and you can very clearly see the direction that USA Today is going. Right, just the language, the perception, and we can see that. So here, not to mention the little title here, we haven't learned anything. During the 14-day Chauvin trial, new images of fatal police encounters in Chicago, Brooklyn Center, Minneapolis, and elsewhere have competed with the now familiar video clips of Floyd pleading for his life while
Okay,
pinned under
hold
sheriff's
on.
knee.
So the Chicago one, is that the woman with the taser, or lack thereof?
No, that was actually also in Minneapolis. That was like 10 miles or something away. I'm not actually
Okay.
sure which one they're referring to, which is Chicago.
Brooklyn Center, Minnesota sounds like it's 10 miles away. There's another encounter supposedly in Chicago. Okay, whatever. I mean,
It makes sense considering the video underneath is that particular encounter.
okay,
Which, and what's interesting is while the verdict was being read, there was also another shooting incident in Ohio.
right.
I find it really important to bring up these 2 points because here you go. All right, so here's an instance. The video they show here, ironically, they show this one, but they don't show the other one. This one, at least in my perception, this female officer, 26 years in the force, et cetera, she made a mistake. But I personally feel she should be prosecuted for it. I don't know. As an owner of a firearm, you have a
You do
responsibility
have a
here.
responsibility.
You have a
Yeah, that's a
responsibility,
fatal mistake.
and that is a
Um,
mistake that ended somebody's life.
yeah,
Now,
you and I will
mind
talk
you,
later. I don't think she should have been in that particular position to begin with, but that's a whole other. I think that's a conversation we will save for part two. Is a
yeah,
discussion
yeah,
of body weight in policing.
I would completely agree on that one. But here's the other thing: is that the gentleman, the man whose name now eludes me currently, Mr. Wright. I know that I just can't remember his first name. He's resisting police. You should not be resisting police. That leads partially to events like this occurring, and it led to this event occurring. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that,
Well,
you
you
know,
have to if you are the police, you have to anticipate that sometimes criminals will resist police. Right? They've already presumably done something. They haven't. You can't presume they've done something, but the police have presumed they've done something in that circumstance. And like
right.
so, I mean, there's also a yeah. We're going to get into this. I think there's you might call me a biological essentialist, but there's a point about just like the lizard brain and the amygdala in that moment right where it's like, okay, well, this officer is 6.5 feet tall and 250 pounds. That officer is not. you know, and, and so like if I'm looking for the way out and I'm a desperate criminal who wants a way out, well, I found one.
Yeah, yeah. That again, we were going to say that
Yep.
conversation for sure. But there's something there to be said. Now, mind you, of what you just mentioned, there's a lot of very left-leaning individuals, a lot of people that believe there's police reform really needs to happen, and I think definitely some has to. But just the language you even use there, they're going to say, "Oh, well, if you're approaching someone with that mindset, you've already failed," because that also leads to these events occurring. And partially, I agree with that.
The police had in this particular case, the police had a warrant out. It's their job to approach with that mindset. No, look, it's not the judge's job to approach with that mindset. The judge has a
Right.
mandate, innocent until proven guilty. The police have a mandate, stop anything that's suspicious and find out. And so those are different mandates.
Right. Well, he had a warrant out for his arrest, but like again, I'm
The judicial branch is not the executive branch. It has different, the
right.
idea that the idea that every policeman should be an expert in the law the way a judge is like that's ridiculous.
Cabinet, heal for a second, heal. Stop it. Slam the drawers shut. Yes, wait a second. This is one of the inherent problems that people on the left will always comment. If police enter this sphere, arresting this person with that mindset that he could be a problem, that leads to problems. But the issue is to argue against what they're saying also. A police officer has to approach situations with that way. You cannot separate those two things. You simply cannot. So you can't. You can't separate the concept that officer says, okay, this person has a warrant out for their arrest for, let's say, deadly use of a firearm, or a robbery with the use of a firearm. What do you expect
Well,
that
and
person?
don't get me wrong, the police can be wrong, right? They can make all kinds of mistakes and come after me without a warrant, or come after me with the wrong warrant, or whatever, or pull me over for doing nothing. Um, I can go fight that, and if I'm in the right, get it cleared. And yeah,
Right.
that's the appropriate response for. Clearly, the criminal in this case did not respond appropriately. Clearly, the officer should not have reached for a fatal firearm when reaching for a taser. That's a deadly mistake to begin with. Although some departments don't have tasers to begin with. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. Let's stick with the Chauvin trial.
Right. But I'm going to mention this one last part. Yeah,
Yep.
Kim Potter was the name of the female officer. I think she's going to be prosecuted, and that she should. And Dante Wright is the name of the gentleman there. You see being arrested or attempted to be arrested if you were to watch the whole rest of the video.
Yep.
The other video that came out and happened again when things were being read for a Chauvin case was this 16-year-old girl in Ohio who was running at people with a knife, slashing and trying to stab two people, and the officer shot her within 20 seconds of arriving a number of times and killed her.
Yeah, it's a very, very different case.
Right,
Obviously, this article
right,
is framing them all as similar things, and the
right.
only thing that these things have in these cases have in common, I guess, is an officer interacting with a criminal who dies. But all of them die for very, very different reasons. Um, is it all a racial disparity where the officer is white and the criminal is black? Maybe, but it doesn't mean that there weren't other combinations of shooting deaths
Factors.
this week.
Yeah.
So like those are the ones that USA Today cherry picked fine.
Right. So, like in this case with the police officer discharging a firearm instead of taser, she should be prosecuted. But in the other instance, that person was completely in the right. Now, mind you, the Twitter sphere, people are already panicking and freaking out, saying, "Oh, why didn't you shoot her in the leg? Why didn't?" I mean, someone said you could shoot the knife out of her hand. I didn't realize that I had a slow mo vision. The ability to do that.
Oh no,
Um,
no, no! That guy is uh, apparently a big damn hero, and and the world is going to react very, very differently because of the context of these things.
Right. And imagine if he was slow and that girl who's wearing a pink jumpsuit got stabbed a number of times and died. Then, the arguments would have been, oh, well, he didn't react fast enough.
Yeah,
There's no win.
the police do
There's
nothing. They
simply
don't
no
care
win.
about this community, so forth. So on. Yeah.
Yeah, people aren't willing to put themselves in the shoes of these individuals, which is a vital thing, but
Well,
they
well,
refuse
and,
to do
well it, I don't know. Like I think most people are. I think most people you could have this reasonable conversation with. I think there are professional activists who choose to view things through a certain lens
that. Yeah,
because it benefits their
yeah.
cause.
All right, I went on my rant. We'll keep
Okay.
going. I'm sorry. All right, so it's like we haven't learned anything, said Philip Stinson, a criminal justice professor at Bowling Green State University who studies crimes involving police. I don't know if we've made any meaningful progress since the 2015 White House policy report.
Okay.
Yet Stinson and other analysts said that findings outlined in the study commissioned by the Obama administration are likely more relevant than at the time they were issued. Quote, if you go back to the report, I think you find there's a lot of meat is left on that bone, Stinson said. There's a lot there to work with.
I would argue. I would agree in a way that he would not like,
Yeah, yeah, I
which
know.
is yes, because this framing of looking at things, exemplified by that report, among others, causes this problem,
Mm-hmm.
or at least
Yeah,
exacerbates it.
right. Again, President Biden, moments before the trial decision was to be made, he said, "Oh, I pray they make the right decision." How stupid! You shouldn't say a word. Say nothing. But
Right.
well, I'm sorry. We got to get.
If you're going to say anything, you say something like, "I trust that the jury um, will deliberate and come to the decision that they think is right."
Right. All right. So, a reckoning with the system, a break in the blue law. During closing arguments in the Chauvin trial Monday, Minneapolis prosecutor Steve Schleicher? I'm German and I should know
Yeah,
this.
Schleicher.
Schleicher sought to
He's
separate the
American.
murder
He
case
probably doesn't
against.
pronounce it that way. Who knows? It probably got mangled
Yeah,
at Ellis Island and had a few S's taken out.
yeah, I pride myself on trying to do names, so it's a failure on my part. The former officer from a referendum against the American policing. To be clear, this case is called the State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, the prosecutor told the jury. This is not called the State of Minnesota versus the police. But Samuel Walker, a professor emeritus of criminal justice at the University of Nebraska, said that the broader implications of the case and policing at large cannot be ignored. In an external sense, the prosecutor's argument is true, Walker said, but I think the public focus on the related problem of policing is very widespread and deep. I think there will be a response and that mayors and governors will demand more policing reforms. Well, of course they're going to demand more policing reforms because the political winds of voters are going that direction.
Yeah.
That's a dog chasing a car. That's what that is.
Yep. So that's very typical a politician putting his finger in the air, seeing which way it's going. Like there's no
Right.
There's no evidence, though, um, that those reforms are going to prevent any of this.
Right. I mean, again, I think one of the biggest things is if you can try to get as many cameras on police officers as possible, then I think in the long run that's going to work in your favor because the majority of officers are doing things correct. And for those who don't do something correct, then yeah, then we see that on video and those officers are gone because that's
Maybe
what should happen.
maybe for police officers cameras, I'm still torn because I don't like the Orwellian police state. Like, I don't like the camera everywhere. I don't think that police officers shouldn't be able to pick his nose in the dark. You know what I mean? Um,
Right, but at the same time, this is a camera on the
you are the
authorities
authority, and
over
so,
your
so
direct force.
I will, I guess, sort of defer to that.
I'm totally in on the idea of officers wearing cameras.
I'm skeptically in. Right? I have reservations.
Right, right. I'm sure you would. I know, knowing you,
I just do. I mean,
I'm
like,
in on this one.
you know, I think that, yeah. If you need to be watched, we're sort of already admitting that there's been an ethical failure.
Yeah, well, that is one of the inherent problems. That I can agree with as well. I can understand that, and that's
And
huge.
I'm not saying that in all places and at all times you won't have a certain percentage who are corrupt. Um, but I don't know if that's worth treating everyone like they might be corrupt.
Yeah, and that's sad in so many ways. All right,
So
here I'm gonna keep rolling.
Floyd's death.
Since
Yep.
Since Floyd's death in May, Walker said he tracked community reactions in the country's 50 largest cities, concluding that local officials approved an array of changes to law enforcement tactics, from bans on police chokeholds to prohibiting so-called no-knock warrants that led to the death of Kentucky woman Breonna Taylor during a police raid last year. Okay, so there's a
Okay.
bridge
The
right
Breonna
back
Taylor
up.
thing is much more convoluted than you might think, and you'll notice it's not being talked about a lot because the facts of that
Uh-huh.
case are not quite like the facts of this case.
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
mean, again, so man, I don't someone opening fire from inside a building at police, police, engage, but that's,
Well, there's a whole other thing where it's like Breonna Taylor wasn't an angel either. Turns out
yeah, yeah. But again, regardless if you're not an angel or not,
the warrant was for the location that was being used as a you can check out Nate the lawyer's take on this. Um, the location was being used as a center of operations by a criminal enterprise, right? So it was
that's
like,
right.
if you're in this location, too bad, you know.
Oh,
And
yeah. See, and
and
that's
how could you be in that location and not know?
right. See,
It's
again,
beggar's belief
you're right.
that
You're
Breonna
opening
Taylor
fire on police,
was
though.
innocent.
Right, but Breonna Taylor, mind you, didn't have the firearm, or at least may not have had.
No,
He
may not
could
have had.
have. Oh,
Yeah, it's an
so
ugly
many
situation. I
factors
think
there.
it could have been done better, but you know, it's
Right.
it's not this situation. It's apples to
Again,
oranges, I think.
yeah, people still not putting themselves in the shoes of the police officers. You're getting shot at. What are you supposed to do? But there's other factors involved there too. We'll
Yeah.
keep going, keep going. We'll have to talk
Okay.
about that later.
So Walker said 84% of cities approved at least some changes in local law enforcement policy or operation in just a 4 month period between Memorial Day and Labor Day last year. I am guardedly optimistic that the pace of reform will continue post Chauvin, Walker said. What reforms? She's talking generally about reforms, like which reforms. The professor also noted that Chauvin's trial, specifically the prosecution testimony at Minneapolis Police Chief Midaria Arradondo and other city commanders who condemned the officers' tactics, represented an important break from traditional so-called blue wall of silence. But they're city officials commenting on a trial that hasn't been resolved, which is, yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
but they were on the side of the prosecution, saying that what Chauvin did was incorrect and he did not follow procedures.
okay, but all right. I guess if the prosecution called them as witnesses, that's one thing. Interestingly enough, if you look at their handbook, it's in there.
And that's the point I was going to bring up, is that even though this chief of police went against Chauvin and specifically denounced him in the handbook, and the defense brought up, like, well, then why is
Yeah.
this in the handbook, and why were they trained this way? If you're saying what he did was incorrect,
So
why
it's
is
either
this
it's
still in the
either
system?
duplicitous, self-serving hypocrisy, or never attribute to malice what might be attributed to ignorance. Maybe they haven't read their own handbook. Maybe they're just that incompetent.
What's new?
Okay.
Oh, God. All right, all right, all right. In which police have been hesitant to criticize fellow officers, let alone bear witness against them in criminal trials, as we see here below. The command officers were willing to testify, set an exceptional precedent, Walker said. You cannot discount the significance of that and what it signals to other police chiefs. Following the Chauvin verdicts Tuesday, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris also called on Congress to follow through on a proposed legislation that bears Floyd's name. That's disgusting in many ways,
Yep.
because using that, I don't even. That reminds me of what Nancy Pelosi did when, I don't know if you saw the video clip when Nancy Pelosi was like, "Oh, we," basically praising the death of George Floyd and thanking him for his sacrifice.
Okay, that and these people with megaphones. I was going to get to it. Can I play this clip a little bit? I'm just going to
Yeah, go
step up
for
to
it.
the top here. So it's this clip at the top, right? Let me. Is this it?
No, that's talking about California with
Oh, I
Jim.
think I think my video skipped here. Hold on. Here we go.
Well, it didn't. Yeah, you have to reload it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It got to the end and played something new.
Not
Okay.
going anywhere.
How do I?
Who stepped up, all the activists who stepped up, and many who think they're not activists, but amen. Because justice
Trying to
for
get the.
George means freedom for all.
And they start chanting. I'll put the closed captions on maybe. Here we go.
I can hear him. So
Okay. All right, so people are crying because they are so emotionally wrapped up in this for the last year by the media. So they're saying something, something, George Floyd. What is something, something?
I want to be able to.
These people waving their BLM flags. Okay.
the other thing, Reuters was interesting. Reuters had a live feed inside the courtroom when they were reading everything, and also they had a live camera outside. And I was
Yeah.
watching outside, and again, you had some people that were saying, obviously they're chanting about the case, but then immediately, almost immediately, within 10 minutes, they start saying, this isn't the end. We're going to go get, and they said the name of the female police officer, also in Minneapolis, and they were saying the names of other people, and like, we're going to take this beyond. Now, I
Right.
hope that
So it's
there's
obviously
desire
it's obvious
justice.
that the people with the megaphones are professional political activists, right?
Well,
Like it's obvious that
maybe.
this is not a like the people out there in that crowd. I believe that those people are by and large emotionally invested and sort of a grassroots response.
I mean, yes, it's possible, but then again, ask your neighbor, do you have a loudspeaker of that size in your home?
Oh no, I'm not saying that the megaphone makes them I'm saying that their tactics, their sort of that's a very professional maneuver with
Right, I'm
at
saying,
the height of emotion and before it dies down to say, okay, and now this is the next objective.
yeah. And again, I hope it is purely for justice, because there obviously are officers that make mistakes that should be held completely and utterly accountable. It's just will this wave continue to officers? Again, I mean, there were people that wanted the officer in Ohio who shot the 16-year-old girl who was trying to stab people. Like, oh, he deserves to burn. What are you talking about? He did his job.
Yeah.
They're so blind. Some of them are so blind. But then again, this is why I think it's good to have that video, because you're very easily going to be able to see the distinction between this officer did his or her job, this officer failed, and should be held accountable.
Right, but all of these things are technically very small, like the actual shootings and deaths. Like I'm not saying that any death is small, but it is in the scheme of a nation, and yet it's capturing the national attention, and that's because of this framing, and this framing is something else. There have been people shot every week in the United States for all of its history. There are people dying today in the United States. Probably most of them not by police officers. And certainly any unwarranted shooting by a police officer is wrong and should be stopped and should be worked against. But I mean, bad things happen in the world. Where's our sense of perspective? Where's our sense of proportion?
And that's the thing, is that the discussion that we were having earlier before we started this, the African American community sees things a little differently than perhaps we do, and that's why when we get the gavel here, I'm very curious to hear her.
I want to have that conversation, because I don't think that the gavel would say that the African American community is a monolith, or that guy with the megaphone speaks for the African American quote community. Like there's not a but I know what you mean. But I just refuse to use the framing provided by the activists.
Right. But I'm never going to judge by the group as having a singular opinion. But I'm certainly going to say in that instance that there is a much larger percentage of people in the African American community that view policing negatively than other communities for a multitude of reasons. The history, et cetera, et cetera. And because of that, that's why you look at the number of activists there who are African American, who are clearly connected to George Floyd, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we got to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I figured it out. Just wait for the activists to I don't know.
Yeah, we're gonna keep burning through this.
Yeah.
Ah, shoot! I lost my place. You got it?
Yeah. Walker said 84% of the cities approved at least some measures. Guardedly optimistic. We did that. The professor also noted that Chauvin's trial, specifically the prosecution testimony of the Minneapolis police, right, the blue wall silence, right? So they're like, oh, we're so happy the prosecution was able to get testimony from these hypocrites at the top of the policing organization, it appears.
Yeah, it's further down here.
The command officers.
George Floyd Justice.
Oh yeah. So the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would bolster police accountability, make it easier to prosecute law enforcement officers for misconduct, and create a national registry to track officers who try to move from one department to another. Is that legal?
That's something that they were pushing to with teachers, with educators.
Okay, so again, I have innocence until proven guilty. I'm a citizen, right? So if I'm a teacher, yes, I think that monsters should not be. I mean, look, with regards to touching children, I don't know why they don't lock them up and throw away the key. I mean, first offense, there's some ambiguity about the situation. There's some gray area. Okay, maybe the guy gets a second chance. Second offense, nope. That should be a capital crime, and so it should either be life with no parole or hang them high. I don't understand why there's like mercy for that. Again, like I said, one misunderstanding, I get it. Two, nope.
It depends on the case too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know a person or knew a person who had a misunderstanding, and there was no evidence except for the word of a child and his word that he didn't do anything wrong. And so, in that case, without any other history of anything having gone wrong, clearly he could not continue to work in a school environment. already. Like that was just not going to happen. But I
Hmm.
don't know that it should destroy the rest of his life because he claims didn't do anything wrong. So, you know, but if there was another case, be like, okay, well, this society can no longer take a chance on you.
There's so
I
many
I just don't
factors.
get it.
Yeah.
In any case, and you know, and from this point forward in his life, I assume that his policy will be to never be alone in a place where a child's word could have that much weight.
Hmm.
So that you just don't put yourself in that position. That's what you know as an educator. But
Hmm.
the idea that police or educators, because they perform a public service, shouldn't have the same rights as citizens is crazy to me. And trust me, there are a lot of politicians I don't like, who I wish that we could treat them more harshly, but they have citizens' rights. This is this is a violation of your Fourth Amendment. I don't like
Yeah. Here,
lists. This Robespierre
here,
shit.
we're gonna we're gonna keep rolling too
Okay.
because I want to get into that. We're gonna save some of that for later. It's all right. The bill has stalled in the Senate, where Republicans have criticized several aspects of the bill,
Yes.
including provision eliminating some legal immunity for officers designed to shield them from unwarranted complaints. Of course, they still need legal immunity because you are holding a firearm, and sometimes you have to shoot people who are trying to stop other people.
This comes from a point of view that there shouldn't be firearms. Like, and
Yeah,
it's
I
such
know.
a like. Look at England. Let's talk about the Muslim
Yeah.
rape gangs. Like, no, I can't talk about that. Okay,
Doesn't
proceed.
exist. Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Attorney General Merrick Garland, who Tuesday said the Chauvin jury had fulfilled its civic duty, said a federal civil rights inquiry into Floyd's death is continuing. David Harris, a University of Pittsburgh law professor who writes extensively about police conduct, said any rethinking of law enforcement operations must also include shifting responsibilities for calls involving the homeless, mentally ill, even traffic infractions away from police.
Okay.
We just don't need people with guns and handcuffs for everything, Harris said.
Yep.
But
So,
any measure of future success has to involve a reckoning with the system that brought us here. Go ahead.
so this is a desire to abolish. Like, this is such a utopian pipe dream of the left. Like,
It
okay,
does not
things
work
are
that
getting
way.
worse in our cities lately. Things are getting worse in the country for a number of reasons in terms of tension. I'm not saying that it's headed inevitably in a bad direction, but some of these things have been worse lately. And your solution is to defang and disarm the authority with which you would enforce your increasing tangled web of law. You've already created laws that are impracticable to enforce, and now you want to take away the means with which to even enforce them. it's just, it's so convoluted to me. All right. Until
Oh,
Floyd, yeah,
it's gonna be
you
a
go ahead
mess.
if you have any.
It's gonna be it's gonna be such a mess because you're gonna have instances where officers are not gonna want to police in urbanized areas or areas that are perceived as bad because of the way these rules are. They're gonna move out, and that's just gonna lead really negative things that are gonna happen in these cities.
You can just
And
look at the history of some of these cities. You can look at the history of Detroit. You can look at the history of Trenton and Camden. Like they've these sorts of things have happened before, based on policies. Like there was Trenton had a policy which was you can't join the Trenton police force unless you have a zip code in Trenton and prove that you live there. Well, that means that your pool of qualified candidates just shrank tremendously. I mean, imagine somebody who
Mhm.
lives just across the river over here in Freedom Land, who's highly qualified, and is willing to take a little less pay because they have such a nice place to live over here, and don't
I'm
have to
sorry.
pay New Jersey taxes.
Did you just refer Pennsylvania as Freedom Land?
Yes, America starts here.
you, oh, man.
As opposed to the Democratic People's Republic of New Jersey.
Well, I mean, Tom Wolfe isn't really helping us right now
No,
here in the
well,
comments.
I'm like, go back 20 or 30 years because this is an old policy Trenton had. So once
Yeah,
upon a
yeah, yeah.
time, Pennsylvania was a free place, where the light touched, unlike New Jersey where the light does not touch. Um,
I mean, the only place the only freedom left in Pennsylvania is like beyond Lake Wampaupack, way up there in the Poconos,
Yep.
where there's more animals than people.
Yep. Or down near West Virginia in the Appalachian foothills.
Oh yeah, the very southwest corner. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
South Central. Away from the actual cities, though. The cities out there are terrible.
yeah, yeah, yes, yes,
So
yes.
the point is, Trenton had a policy where they would not hire police officers who did not have a zip code in Trenton. And it was like,
Yes.
okay, well, the quality of the candidates you're going to get, you're not even going to be able to fill the jobs that you need filled. Like it was
Yeah.
just it was like well-intentioned policy. Oh, we want to make sure that the people who police in this community have a relationship with the community, so that they live here, they have a vested interest. No, that doesn't work.
So no, it certainly doesn't. I want to keep going, but at the
Yep.
same time, I wonder if we should stop here and finish it next time.
Yeah,
What are your
yeah.
thoughts?
Guardian rather than warrior mindset. I can remember that. We ought to hit
Oh
our
yeah,
Epictetus quote, and then I can let you go relatively early.
yeah. We definitely. I want to get into this, but at the same time, I want to wait because I want to be able to go over some of the stuff with the gavel.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Um, see if Project Gutenberg is up. It was down one day. It scared me.
I know you were panicking. It was
Well,
actually
shut
somewhat
up.
entertaining.
It's like the most important thing on the internet.
It-
By far.
I secretly enjoyed watching you pace a little bit. It was interesting to watch. I'm sorry.
Um, blast. I should write down where we're at. Um, I feel like we did 13.
well, definitely whatever we pick this time, we need to make a note of it.
Yeah, let me just make a note. I don't think we've done 14 yet. So
Okay.
I'm going to go with 14. If you wish your children and your wife and your friends to live forever, you are foolish. For you wish things to be in your power which are not so, and what belongs to others to be in your own, to be your own. Likewise, if you wish your servant to be without fault, you are foolish, for you wish vice not to be vice, but something else. But if you wish not to be disappointed in your desires, that is in your own power. Exercise therefore what is in your power. A man's master is he who is able to confer or remove whatever that man seeks or shuns. Whoever then would be free, let him wish nothing, let him decline nothing, which depends upon others. Else he must necessarily be a slave.
Yeah, a lot of people feel they can control everything, particularly in modern times, and you have to have the mindset that there are things out of your control, and you also have to be prepared for those things.
The more you control things, I was having this discussion with somebody the other day, like nature. Like you can build a dike to keep your city from flooding, but at some point, nature's going to have its way, right? And it might be 100 years, maybe you build 1,000 years dike, but the 1,000-year storm will arrive at some point. and the longer
Right.
you put off a small disaster, the bigger the disaster will be when it really comes. And it doesn't mean don't build a 1,000-year dike for your city. That seems like generally prudent. But it does mean like don't expect that you've solved it forever. Or that there
Right.
won't ever be a setback. This is the problem of our financial system. Oh, there's a setback. Oh, the banks might not be able to, pay what they owe. Let's just pump money into the system so there's liquidity. Well, okay, you're robbing Peter to save Paul, and sooner or later there will be a piper to pay. All right.
Yeah, so definitely something to talk about for another time. But yeah, we're definitely going to get into this more. I don't want to seem like it was abrupt, like we stopped, but I know there's a huge section coming after. I know that was the perfect place to end for the week, so that maybe next week we can get into more detail.
Yeah.
So there's going to be more. Again, a guardian rather than a warrior mindset. There's a
Take note
lot
of
of
that.
stuff in there.
I'll put that on our prediction list, and then we can do our predictions next week.
Yes, definitely. So with that, I'm the department chair.
I am the cabinet. This is the
Some
cabinet.
we still we're some sort of mixed furniture item. We'll see you guys next week.